with Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, June 23, 2020. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps and steps and steps and steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Professor of History at the University of Mississippi, Garrett Felber. On Those Who Know, Don't Say, the Nation of Islam, the Black Freedom Movement, and the Carceral State. Meanwhile, key primaries for progressives in New York and Kentucky. Corona cases rising in well over a dozen states as Trump's White House looks to scapegoat the CDC. The House Judiciary Committee announces it's going to subpoena Bill Barr over his bungled Friday night massacre, among other things. And police in D.C. thwart, sadly, an Andrew Jackson toppling as the White House locks down. Still no word as to whether Bunker Boy headed to the bunker. On the Hill, Fauci, Redfield, Hahn, and the hydroxy doctor will testify to a Democratic House committee hearing. While Democrats in the Senate threaten to block a Republican weak tea police reform bill. Trump slams the door on skilled immigrants. And Martha McSally's so desperate, she proposes giving wealthy people more money. All this and more on today's program. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. We will start off today by reading a fan email. Maybe not a fan. I don't know. It is. We received it yesterday at about 4:45 p.m. from Tim. I'm not going to use his last name. Sam Cedar shouldn't have shaved his mustache. All the best, Tim. That was it. So I just wanted to get that out of the way.
That's prevailing sentiment, I think.
Is that right? Seriously?
Yesterday the chat went so crazy when you first appeared that I thought the stream went down.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm sorry about that, folks. Maybe for a special occasion I will regrow the mustache.
You could take a Twitter poll maybe too.
We could take a Twitter poll. I mean, these are the important issues that we really need to deal with. Welcome to the program. Just another day during a pandemic where we are starting to see the implications of Memorial Day, essentially. A little more than 2 weeks ago, rises in infections and in hospitalizations. States like Arizona, Texas is now starting to get a little worried. Also, Oklahoma and Oregon, California. In fact, it's rising in about 16 states across the country significantly, and of course, picking up the pace. Now, the interesting dynamic that's going on here is that while we have seen a rise in infections and a nearly commensurate rise, in hospitalizations, we have seen nowhere near the rise in deaths that we saw, let's say, in New York City. And there's speculation only at this point because people don't know for sure. Obviously, we don't have time to get we don't have enough hindsight yet to get the data, but it appears to be because the average age for people being infected is significantly lower than it was in New York. Probably represents 20 and 30-year-olds going to bars, frankly, in many cases in places like Arizona and Texas, and following the or during Memorial Day and subsequent to that as well. Part of it also may be a function of just the hospitals, the doctors treating patients have more savvy now than they did 2 or 3 months ago because of the experience that people had 2 or 3 months ago. Obviously, theoretically, we're getting better at treating people who have contracted the virus. And there may be some other, some medicines and therapies that are working better as well. So it's a combination of those things. However, we will, I think, see a rise there, and hopefully it won't be nearly as steep as the infection rate will be. And hopefully we do not get to a place, and I suspect it's possible that in localized situations in some of these states, we may get to a place where the capacity to treat people essentially runs out, where there's just, only so many beds. We mentioned yesterday that DeSantis in Florida decided to stop reporting number of ICU patients and report only those patients that need critical care. ICU is intensive care. I guess maybe there's a slight difference. I don't know. But it's going up. It's not going to go away. And hopefully there isn't I don't know. I guess the big question is what happens if it really expands at a rate faster than it was in New York amongst younger people? At one point, does that start to cross a threshold? I guess we will see, because there does not seem to be any type of plan whatsoever to deal with any of this. The only thing it appears that the White House is doing is they are starting to game out a situation where they blame the CDC. So there it is. Donald Trump is very angry these days, apparently, because he embarrassed himself the other day in Oklahoma. And we're starting to see these stories about how he's really mad at Brad Parscale, who is the campaign manager for the Trump campaign. I suspect these are, it may in fact be the case, but I suspect that he's not going anywhere because he's basically overseeing a slush fund. And you don't necessarily want the guy who's been signing checks on the slush fund to be cut loose, particularly this early.
Parcell was the one that Trump wanted to sue for giving him bad poll results about a month ago.
I wonder if you can if that's actionable. If you guys give me bad YouTube numbers, just be aware that I may come after you. Folks, I think you probably have come across the dynamic where small changes in your everyday life can lead to positive lifestyle changes. I remember when I first, and I think it was because I was inspired by Tim Ferriss, if you can believe it, I think, to start making my bed every day, like actually make it, nicely. And part of the inspiration for that was, frankly, my Brooklyn and sheets. And I found that after I made my bed, I started to organize my room a lot more. Because I don't know if people are aware of this, but I but I like a little bit of chaos in front of me at all times because it makes me feel like I'm calm. But not only can making your bed set you on the right path, things like changing your towels can make your bathroom feel like a spa. Wearing certain loungewear can turn function into luxury. And you can make all of these upgrades, like I say, with Brooklinen. Hopefully by now you know that Brooklinen is the internet's favorite sheets, but they're also home to bedding, loungewear, towels with more than over 50,000 five-star reviews and counting. Now they have everything for life essentials, including shower curtains, bath mats, robes, totes, the final details that make your big upgrade. I love the sheets, folks, and I'm starting to zero in on some towels from Brooklinen. My experience with Brooklinen sheets has been really fantastic. I am now almost 100% Brooklinen. And I'm just, I can't bring myself to throw out the old nasty sheets, all of them, but I'm going to. I've been really happy. And now I'm starting to look at my towels. Brooklinen has some, and they have, 3 different, I think, tiers of towels, like the really luxurious ones, the sort of the classic ones, and then these ones that are lighter that dry very quickly. I tend to go with the classic on everything, but brooklinen.com, it's the perfect place to start making these small changes that end up making big differences. Brooklinen is so confident in their products that all their sheets, all their comforters, their loungewear, their towels, they come with a lifetime warranty. Go on, folks. Make yourself comfortable. Get 10% off your first order and free shipping when you use the promo code MAJORITY only at brooklinen.com. Brooklinen, everything you need to live your most comfortable life. We will put a link to brooklinen.com and a reminder that the promo code is majority in our podcast description and our YouTube description. All right. So, we have this situation where, for the most part, there's still a tremendous amount of denial out there as to the implications of COVID-19. And however, in Arizona, the good news is that apparently you can still go to your local mega church if you go to the Dream City Church in Phoenix, because they have, not only are they, hosting services and I imagine doing other things at that church, that mega church, but they also have invented devices to kill most of the coronavirus. Who knew?
COVID-19 here at Dream City Church. We're probably the first church in the nation to...
Yeah, we've installed Clean Air EXP. We have a local Arizona company. It was technology developed by some members of our church, and we've installed these units, and it kills 99.9% of COVID within 10 minutes. From independent testing.
It's ionization. Is that what it is?
It's ionization of the air, and it takes particulates out, and COVID cannot live in that environment.
So when you come into our auditorium, 99% of COVID is gone, killed, if it was there in the first place. So you can know when you come here, you'll be safe and protected. Thank God for great technology, and thank God for being proactive.
Amen.
Bless you guys.
Yeah. Now, I don't know. This is the church that is hosting Donald Trump for his rally, and they may be a little bit concerned based upon what happened in Oklahoma that nobody's going to show up. But now they're promising that they have something that will kill 99.9% of COVID-19. Now,
I'd like to get that to 100, but
well, that's the thing is that I'm in no position to assess their claim. I'm a little skeptical, but apparently, I mean, there is, according to some, that plasma air ionization reduces coronavirus. But then the question is 99.9, is that enough to reduce it, to make it safe for people to go in there? I mean, I guess that's, people are going to take, we're going to roll the dice. But that's quite a coincidence that the church that is hosting Donald Trump has come up with a special machine to kill all the coronavirus in the church.
Necessity is the mother of invention, Sam.
Boom, boom. All right. Well, good luck. And I mean, I would pray for you, but I'm not sure that I'm hitting all the right, I don't know that my prayers hit that target. The don't catch coronavirus in the Trump rally in a church target. But if it does, good luck. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to Professor of History at University of Mississippi, Garrett Felber, on his book, Those Who Know Don't Say, The Nation of Islam, the Black Freedom Movement, and the Carceral State. Quick break. Be right back. Okay, we are back. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome to the program Professor of History at the University of Mississippi, author of Those Who Know Don't Say, The Nation of Islam, the Black Freedom Movement, and the Carceral State. Professor Garrett Felber, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me on, Sam.
So let's start with, I mean, the one of the things I like about the title of your book is it really does cover it, but it doesn't. It also raises a question in many respects. But let's just start with those who know don't say. Where is that? What does that refer to?
So that title comes from a phrase that Muslims in the Nation of Islam would use when asked about their political engagement. So they would say, those who say don't know and those who know don't say. So the idea there was sort of that they were engaged in a politics that was strategic and often hidden from view. And then, sort of the second half of that phrase, which is that those who were saying they sort of understood the Nation of Islam often were outsiders. So I chose that title. It is a little obscure in a way that I hope draws people in, because really that was the sort of challenge of the book for me, was to try and show the ways that people might think the Nation of Islam was not politically engaged during the Black Freedom Movement, but how it sort of did so strategically and often silently.
And I mean, so what was the specific political agenda of the Nation of Islam that it was both doing strategically and, I guess, to a certain extent, maybe surreptitiously is a little overstated, but in a low-key fashion?
Yeah, so I mean, for people who don't know, the Nation of Islam was a Black nationalist religious organization. So, they were committed to building a Black nation within the United States. They didn't see themselves as citizens of the U.S. But in part because of the way that the state tried to repress the organization, they had to be really thoughtful about how they positioned their politics. So the majority of the men in the organization were incarcerated during World War II, charged with sedition for refusing to serve in the war, in part because they, as I said, they didn't see themselves as citizens. So pretty much thereafter, they were surveilled by the FBI, infiltrated by local and state police, And the state really tries to make this argument that the Nation of Islam is a hate group, and that they're not, in fact, sincere in their religious beliefs, and that the sort of larger Muslim world rejects them. And so they were sort of always positioned in a way by the state repression to have to make arguments of religious legitimacy, of not being political, because to be political was often to be framed by the state as a hate group, and lots of civil rights organizations, or mainstream civil rights organizations, started characterizing them, especially in the 60s, as nothing but a example of a black KKK or reverse racism or black hate. So they were sort of pigeonholed in this way that they had to be very strategic about when they said that they were doing political work.
I want to put a pin in that aspect of how the sort of the I guess what you call the mainstream black rights organizations were attempting to sort of I guess characterize the Nation of Islam. But let's talk about the relationship between the I guess in some ways the prison abolition movement, the relationship to the carceral state was sort of born out of this dynamic.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people don't necessarily know how influential the Nation of Islam was in terms of organizing inside prisons. So pretty much from this moment in the mid-1940s, when Elijah Muhammad and other ministers, about 100 or so, constitute the largest number of Black conscientious objectors during the war. And they go to prison and actually meet abolitionists. And there, those abolitionists are largely associated with the Friends, the Quakers. So they don't necessarily become abolitionists per se, but they're sort of part of this radical political scene in the 1940s, and it begins this long-term relationship with sort of organizing within prisons. And it's actually through the Nation of Islam's prison litigation in the late 50s and early 60s that prisoners for the first time get constitutional rights. So prior to that, incarcerated people were considered slaves of the state according to the Constitution, and the judicial branch essentially sees incarcerated people as solely within the purview of corrections. It's not something that they weigh in on. So it's really not until the mid-1960s with a case out of Illinois by a Muslim named Thomas Cooper that incarcerated people have undeniably constitutional rights. And that sort of opens the door for what we see as the prisoners' rights movement. And then out of that, of course, this long strain of abolition.
Explain to us what this term that you call dialectics of discipline is. I guess it's a phrase.
Yeah, so it's, I was trying to capture what I was seeing in the archive, which was really a dynamic between state repression and Muslim resistance. And I kept trying to, it was sort of a chicken or the egg thing where I would see some sort of organized resistance by incarcerated Muslims, and then the state would sort of put a rule in place or do some sort of thing to counteract that. And then they would come up with some new form of organizing in response. And I just sort of kept tracing it back and back and back and realized, well, this isn't linear. This is really the nature of political organizing. It's dialectical. It always happens in relationship to the repression the state's doing. And so that's the dialectical part. The discipline part was kind of understanding that there's various forms of discipline. There's the state discipline, which is about coercion and repression. And then there's sort of collective and personal discipline, which was shown by Muslims in the nation. So they would do all these things that whether it was prayer or dress or refusing to, do drugs or curse, but even at one point taking over solitary confinement. So they would purposely commit infractions to go to solitary confinement. And the idea was that they would take over solitary to the point where it actually became an ineffective means of punishment. So I started to see the relationship between their sort of collective discipline to do something like that and receive the state's idea of discipline, of punishment.
So how would they take over solitary? Like what would be the implications? Just that because they're attempting to do that, they're sending a message that this is an ineffective punishment, or what was the theory behind that?
Yeah, so the interesting thing about the takeovers of solitary is that it coincides with something that we traditionally see as a civil rights movement strategy, which is jail no bail. So at the exact same time that in Albany, Georgia, student protesters were realizing that instead of, doing nonviolent resistance, getting arrested, and then having to pay bail, which is incredibly expensive and laborious, that they would just refuse to pay bail and fill the jail. And then they would have to figure out, well, now we're jailing massive numbers of people that we can't hold. And this strategy, it's not necessarily that one informed the other, but it was sort of going on at the same time at Attica in New York. The idea was essentially, look, they only have so many solitary cells. And what they're doing is they're pulling us in and out of solitary one by one. And that disrupts organizing because one person's in solitary, one's in general population, they can't communicate. And they decided, well, if we all just force them to hold us in solitary, then they can't put anyone else there for other disciplinary infractions. We're all there organizing. So it sort of turns the site of repression on its head and makes it a site of resistance. So I think there was an interesting parallel where they were sort of doing a similar thing that the civil rights movement was doing. And I think it raises an interesting question, which is, why do we remember Albany, Georgia in the annals of civil rights history? And this strategy at Attica is completely forgotten.
Well, why is that?
I mean, I think it speaks to the invisibility of incarcerated organizing, right? So, I mean, we do have these moments of eruption like Attica in 1971, but this is Attica in 1961. So this organizing is always happening inside prisons, but it's largely invisible in part because of the nature of prisons. Prisons are to forcibly disappear people from our society. So this organizing that happens all the time, it's sort of like the organizing in the streets, right? We have these uprisings now, but they didn't come out of nowhere. They come out of years and decades of organizing. So Attica in 1971 comes out of the long tradition of organizing a decade earlier.
How much of, is that when you look at the role of the Nation of Islam in these movements, is their influence through the years tactical, or were there elements of ideological that also crossed over into the broader Black freedom movement?
I mean, I think there's all sorts of ways that we see evidence of the Nation of Islam in movements and don't often credit it. I mean, both in terms of cultural and sort of Black pride, in hip hop, in all these forms. I mean, the one that I was really trying to pull out in this book was specifically that so often we focus on particular charismatic figures within the Nation of Islam, Malcolm X, Elijah Muhammad, Muhammad Ali, and we kind of look at this national level. And it's about what is the relationship between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, or what is Malcolm saying, and then what is Roy Wilkins with the NAACP saying. And what we miss is that there's hundreds of thousands of people who are part of this movement on the ground or in prison who are organizing locally. So I looked at in LA where there's this coalition against police brutality after a Muslim man is shot in Los Angeles in 1962. And the NAACP is working with the Nation of Islam locally. And it's only at the national level where they really start to have issues with this. So I think it really shows how when we just look at the national level, we miss all sorts of ways that there are coalitions happening on the ground.
How much of what we're seeing today in terms of Black Lives Matter, in terms of, I guess, the defund police movement and the abolition of prisons movement, how much is where is the Nation of Islam's influence the most prominent, would you say?
That's a great question. I mean, I think it's throughout the movement, and it's not necessarily, I mean, one of the things that I think is important about this moment is actually many of the ways that the organizing pushes against some of the tendencies of the Nation of Islam, right? Like the masculinism, the sort of top-down leadership. I mean, the movement now is being led by queer Black women and trans folks. It's decentralized. So I think in some ways there's a lot of organizing the streets that's happening out of the lessons of that moment in the 60s that I write about. But I still think there's a huge strain in terms of prison organizing that the Nation of Islam is responsible for, and the coalitional work against police. Like I mentioned in the early 60s, they had a more radical critique of policing than some of these mainstream civil rights organizations, in part because they were the ones who were most susceptible to it. They were, being infiltrated and brutalized and having their mosques raided. So I think they had a more acute sense of the state violence that was happening at that time.
I mean, is that where, and I guess that gets back to the dialectics of discipline on some level, but I mean, is that where is that the genesis of this movement? Was a function of being on the, specifically the Nation of Islam being on that end of things, or was there an ongoing movement that was then sort of joined?
Yeah, I don't think we can take any sort of one genesis point, for all of this. But for example, there was, there's such a shift between the early 60s, where basically the Nation of Islam was the vanguard within prison organizing spaces, to even, 10 years later, where at Attica in 1971, you have the Young Lords Party, you have the Black Panthers, you have the Nation of Islam, and these groups all have different sort of ideological analyses, organizing strategies. So there was a huge shift, even in that 10-year period, where, the Nation of Islam clearly has a huge impact on something like the Black Panthers. I mean, if you look at the Black Panther 10-point program, it's almost identical to the Nation of Islam's what we want, what we believe. But there's, of course, a whole different set of strategies and analysis that the Panthers have that the Nation of Islam didn't. So, there's never just sort of a one clear line, but all these movements, I think, build on one another and also often build on the sort of weaknesses of these organizations. So when an organization excludes people, like SNCC excluding women, leads to the establishment of a group like the Third World Women's Alliance. So I think it's important to think about some of the shortcomings of these organizations as being beneficial as well.
Tell us about the journey of reconciliation. This is, I wasn't really familiar with this, and Bayard Rustin was one of the people who was involved in that.
Yeah, so this is something I was really interested in, this kind of group of abolitionists that I talked about earlier. So the journey of reconciliation it's sort of known as the first freedom ride. So we often think of the freedom rides of 1961, of students coming down to the South on buses, being jailed at Parchman Farm. And the journey of reconciliation in 1947 was sort of the first iteration of this. It was half Black men, half white men, and the idea was to challenge the recent ruling in the Supreme Court about desegregated interstate travel. But the sort of point that I bring out in this piece that I just wrote recently is that these organizers who are sort of seen as participating in one of the real first nonviolent desegregation struggles of the civil rights movement were also part of this network of prison abolitionists who had spent time during World War II with the likes of Elijah Muhammad and others in federal prisons for refusing the draft. So I think there's just all these ways that these movements really, I often sort of bristle at when someone says like, oh, the civil rights movement of our time is mass incarceration. It's like, state violence has always been the thing that people are struggling against in these movements because it's the repressive arm of the state. Policing and prisons are always the thing that people are dealing with who are organizing for liberation.
We talk a little bit about the role of the more, I guess, so-called mainstream Black advocacy groups, during this time, and I guess how they set themselves apart from the Nation of Islam, and for what purpose?
Yeah, I mean, So it's complicated because in part what happens, really these groups tend to not comment on the Nation of Islam at all until 1959. And in 1959, there's this documentary by Mike Wallace, later of 60 Minutes, called The Hate That Hate Produced. And what they do is they ask people like Roy Wilkins and Anna Arnold Hedgeman, and they sort of ask them to weigh in on what they're calling the rise of Black supremacy, the Nation of Islam. So they've already framed the Nation of Islam's Black nationalism through this idea of it somehow being the opposite of white supremacy. And, you know, these civil rights organizations then denounced the Nation of Islam. Shortly thereafter, the NAACP actually offers a formal resolution at its national convention denouncing the Nation of Islam. And eventually, when there's these coalitions that I mentioned at the local level against police brutality, they even have this really fine point plan that local NAACP leaders have to follow when organizing with the Nation of Islam. They can't say that they're forming a united front. They can't let any speakers be at the rallies. So, you know, there's this real division between these sort of mainstream civil rights organizations and the Nation of Islam. And of course, part of it's ideological. They have different ideas about what racism and capitalism in the United States means, but also it's sort of fomented by these white liberals who sort of, you know, drive this wedge between local organizers.
And it was just found to be, they just quickly made them toxic on some level and sort of forced, I guess, these other organizations into a less militant disposition. Is that it?
Yeah, I mean, just to give a concrete example. So in Los Angeles, there's this murder that I mentioned. And for a couple of months in 62, after this murder, there's a Black United Front in Los Angeles. And Malcolm gives this speech where he says, you know, you're not brutalized because you're Baptist or Methodist. You're not brutalized because you're an Elk or a Mason. You're brutalized because you're Black. And it's this call to sort of understand policing at its root as anti-Black. And this coalition starts building. And the first thing that, you know, the chief of police and the mayor try to do is to divide Black groups. And there's this recognition that that's what they're trying to do. And then after a couple of months, 100 Christian ministers signed something called the Ministers' Manifesto. And what they try to do is both denounce police brutality on one hand, while also calling the Nation of Islam anti-God and sort of this fringe group. So I think we have to recognize the way that the white power structure knows that dividing these groups is effective, but also the deep Islamophobia within communities that was kind of driving this feeling of pushing them to the side.
When you look at, like, you know, what has taken place, I mean, you know, this obviously in many respects, I mean, there's been really years that have led up to the past month, let's say, but in the past month, there has been, as far as I can tell, the most dramatic movement that we've seen, at least in terms of like public perception of these questions and you know, some response on a political level. I mean, I think it's easy to overstate it, but I think at least in terms of public sentiment, things have changed and maybe have hit some type of critical mass. It just strikes me that there is an absence of arrows in the quiver, as it were, for the response to these movements outside of, you know, I mean, there seems to be, like, you know, there's some of the co-opting, there's co-optation on some level, right? Like where corporations are now, you know, are sort of like showing some type of solidarity. But the only other response apparently, or appears to be, just a violent police response, which doesn't seem to be terribly effective in terms of public opinion. But there isn't this sort of, I guess, this quiver full of arrows of dividing and conquering, because there doesn't seem to be the same seams that existed at that time. Does that make sense?
I mean, I think, no, it makes a ton of sense. And I think there's both reason for optimism and for to be vigilant. And the optimism is that the same thing. So, when Stokes is killed in 1962, the LA Times and the mainstream white press say this was a blazing gunfight and a riot. And the only people who can dispute that is the Nation of Islam. And they do it through their press and Muhammad Speaks. But we have the benefit now of people can watch videos and just say, look, whatever the press is saying, whatever the police are saying, I can see this just isn't true. So I think we have the benefit now of not having to fight on those fronts as much, where people can actually see the violence happening in the streets every day, rather than relying on these sources who are, frankly, completely complicit. But I think the quiver or the arrow that is a almost seamless, 50, 60 year magic bullet for counterinsurgency and co-optation is reform. So this case in LA, LA was being heralded as, the most professional, modernized police force when this happened. And then this led to Watts. And then again, it was like, oh, we'll give them SWAT teams and this and that, and it'll be the most professionalized, reformed. We'll do citizen review boards and speakers bureaus. And that's always the call, is reform. And I think, the reason I'm optimistic in this moment is because a lot of people are finally, we've done the political education work for people to know that that's not the answer. That's actually the same thing that they've been trotting out since the beginning. But that's the thing that I think is poised to be the most, co-optive or, sort of counterinsurgent in this moment is reform.
So you think that like when we talk about maybe the bill that's going in Congress, or certainly the Obama administration had instituted a program that the Minneapolis Police Department was one of the, I guess the pilot, the test cases of this extensive reform project, and it failed. And so the biggest, the most prominent arrow you're suggesting is in fact something that co-ops the energy and really doesn't end up doing anything.
Yeah, the number one thing you'll see, right, in all of these cases is a report. So they'll fund a ton of money into a report to tell us what we already know. This is what they did with Watts in Detroit, and and then the Kerner Commission report comes out, and guess what? Even when the Kerner Commission told them what was wrong, they selectively listened to what they wanted to hear and what they didn't, and they wound up giving more money to police. So what they'll do is they'll sort of filibuster for a couple of years by getting this report. And if it's anything like Ferguson, the report is damning, but it doesn't mean that results in actual change. It gets people out of the streets, and it waits for things to quell. And the other thing that they'll do is they'll pour money back into police departments and say, you all need to do bias training, or, purchase more, whatever. And it's like, that's why the defund the police, it means what it asks, right? Or what it demands. It's saying, stop giving money to police to reform themselves, and take that money and invest it in Black and brown communities. So we have to be vigilant about that, because what both sides of the aisle are going to say is that we need more money for police. We just need it to do different things. And that's absolutely not what we need.
And so how does that, I guess, I'm asking maybe something outside of your project, but or this immediate project, but let me ask it including are there lessons that you have found that may be instructive, or any other ideas about what that vigilance looks like? Because in the moment when you have police and scenes of police being this brutal, or in the wake of a video showing, a policeman murdering somebody in front of our eyes, essentially, the protests and clashes with the police drive sympathy and from and sort of like some measure of solidarity from the broader society, not totally, but to some extent, at least meaningful enough. But If you don't have those predicates, how do you maintain that vigilance?
I mean, I think the thing that has to always be there, and this is why I sort of mentioned like long form, when you draw a line and you say, no, this is just a constant struggle, is the political education for people to understand. Because people, when we see George Floyd being murdered, some people see a bad apple, and that's reformable. And some people see an example of a structure that needs to be abolished. And we need to keep people's eyes on the prize. I mean, one of the things I love, a good comrade, Derek Purnell, said, is the justice that we're seeking, say with these reforms being proposed of banning chokeholds or excessive force, is the thing that we call justice, George Floyd, having his neck under someone's knee for 7 minutes? Is it him being arrested and then thrown in jail and then put through this churn of what we call mass incarceration? No, that can't be justice. So we have to think about the things that we see that are sickening and link them to larger structures, because otherwise we're just going to keep tinkering and trimming bushes and thinking that this is just about exceptional violence. It's not. It's about the everyday violence of the system. The whole system relies on the possibility of fatal force. That's how policing works, is that at any moment you could be murdered by the police, and that they will have absolute impunity. So the police relies on violence, and we have to understand that and be vigilant about abolishing those systems and not giving those systems any more of our money.
Garrett Felber, the book is Those Who Know Don't Say: The Nation of Islam, the Black Freedom Movement, and the Carceral State. We will put a link to that at majority.fm. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was a pleasure.
All right, folks. We're going to take a break in just a moment, head into the fun half of the program. Let me remind you, this program relies on your support. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you're supporting the free show. You're getting extra content. Maybe you're encouraging me to regrow my mustache. I'm not going to promise anything, but it's possible. I may feel more whimsical if we get a bunch of new members, and then I just may let it grow. I'm not sure. I'm not going to promise anything, but so head over to jointhemajorityreport.com, become a member today, support the program. Also, don't forget, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. We have merch. We got a special initiative that we're going to do. And let me just introduce that now, just a little bit. This is a little bit of a taste. I'm not even going to put it in context as to what we're talking about, but here it is. And this is, this will let you know what we got going on.
I'm losing it, bro.
That's right. I'm not even going to tell you what that means, but what do they say all the time in broadcasting? Keep your ears on this space, and we will let you know what's happening there. Also, don't forget the AM Quickie. Oh, you can go to speaking of merch, shop.majorityreportradio.com. Shop.majorityreportradio.com. Also, AM Quickie, sign up for that bad boy. Get your 6 or 7 minutes every day. Podcast, totally free. Headlines, check it out. Matt, today's Tuesday. Who's on TMBS tonight?
We got Ronan Burtonshaw of the Tribune, which is George Orwell's former paper, and William Shockey, who will be talking about the ANC, Capitol, and policing. There you go. You can find the Michael Brooks Show on YouTube at youtube.com/The Michael Brooks Show. You can also find it at patreon.com, TMBS/TMBS. Check that out. Do we have Nomi? Is she with us? Not yet.
Not yet. I'll send her the...
All right. Well, don't forget the Nomi Key Show. You can find it on patreon.com/the Nomi Key Show. and also on youtube.com, the Nomi Key Show. Or you could, and tonight, actually, I believe she's going to tell us when she gets here. She is doing some coverage of the New York primaries. We're going to talk about that quite a bit in the fun half today. Nomi knows New York state politics, and this is a big deal. This primary is a big deal. I know a lot of people around the country are like, why do I care about New York 16th? Jamal Bowman, and I encourage you, obviously, if you're in New York and you haven't voted, particularly if you're in one of these districts, you got to go out and vote, folks. You got to go out and vote. Put a mask on. Go away, 6 feet. It's really important. And Nomi will talk more about this. Oh, here she is.
Hello. I was having some issues with my audio. Gosh.
What do you got on your stickers on your computer? I don't.
Oh, you can see them.
Other shows.
Oh my God, those are from.
We got to get.
Give me some stickers.
Well,
I'll rip that TYT stuff off.
The merch stuff. I was just saying, Nomi, that are you going to be doing a live thing tonight?
I am. How funny you ask. Yes, tonight at 7:30 Eastern, we start our live streaming covering the New York primary, which, spoiler alert, we may not know many of the results tonight, tomorrow, the day after that, maybe several days. But we'll have a lot of people on who work in New York politics and some of our congressional challenger candidates that are running around the city talking about the dynamics of what's happening. What's happening with the New York machine? Does it still exist? What are the machines? There's a lot happening. I know everyone's paying attention to Jamal Bowman, but there's some really interesting races.
I want to hear about them a little bit more, but you got to turn your mic down a little bit. Apparently today it's super hot, I've been told.
Is this better?
Matt?
No, not really.
Oh, whoa.
Guys.
What's going on?
I don't know.
All right,
it's maybe a little bit better.
It might
down a little bit
more.
more.
Might adjust it a little bit. Yeah.
Is that better?
I think so. I think we're getting there.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. That's good.
I apologize, guys, for blasting your eardrums.
Well, we'll talk about those races, but I think the Bowman race is huge because
totally, without
there's particularly because there's expectations there now, but it's also like one more member of the House leadership getting knocked out of the box. That's good, and it's gonna send a message that this stuff has not been. This is not fluke. This is not a fluke. This is for reals, and you either get with the program or you shove off. We had AOC on the program on Friday, and she was talking like, she was saying 10, 15 more folks like this, and we'll have some real momentum. And part of the problem too, and I had heard this before, but she reminded us of it, and we'll talk about this in the fun half, but I think it's time for the CPC to have like a little bit of a litmus test.
Yeah.
But we'll talk more about that in a bit.
You mean not
so
just
what's happening? So you're doing this live stream tonight, and then what else? What else do you have for the show this week?
Yeah, so this week we, in full transparency, we had some technical issues. I'm not one to believe in Mercury in retrograde, but I definitely believe in it after this weekend. The sound
is Mercury in retrograde right now?
It is, and literally everything in my life has, between the internet going out, which is just a thing yesterday, the microphone just now, to recording an entire show and then not having it save, even though it says it's recording. So I had to do some quick shifts. So the show's a little late, but it's a really good show this week. We have Asan Lakey, who's running for Congress in Massachusetts. She's a matriarch candidate. It's the 4th district. That's Joe Kennedy's seat. Fascinating race. Lots of people running. Her story is... I knew a lot about her story, and then she really opened up, and I was blown away just by the kind of oppression she faced in Morocco, where she comes from, and just how that lines up with this moment here in the United States. And then we had Ben Dixon on, where we're talking about the uprisings and just the movements on the ground, and he's just been so on fire lately, and I think I would watch, I mean, if you're not already watching Ben's show, I think something's happening there. Like, he's becoming a very big voice in this movement. just watching very closely online, especially. So it's a good interview. But the show tonight is going to be, I mean, if you don't know anything about New York politics, if you live in New York, I would definitely recommend watching this because we're going to dive in and assess. And these are, a lot of the folks that we're having on are folks who are doing the movement work, but we don't really have a vibrant media in New York, despite it being the media capital of the world. And so I'm surprised by, just right now I got some texts from people who are super tapped in nationally, live in New York, and they're like, wait, what's going on? I'm so confused. Can you explain all this stuff? So
without a doubt. And I will say this, for a national audience, the thing that's important about New York politics, it seems to me, and I think I'm becoming more and more clear on this, is that the model that a guy like Cuomo uses, the model that a guy like Schumer uses, and there is an element of like, there's a little bit of corruption in New York State politics, very transactional corruption. But the model that they use is I want, and I will actually work towards having enough people to my right get elected so that so that I can project that I'm more progressive than I am, and can basically look towards my constituents are saying, why aren't we getting X, Y, and Z? And I go, it's because of these guys. And I'm the guy who helped those guys in. So it's Chuck Schumer, like supporting Amy McGrath in Kentucky, or Hickenlooper in Colorado, and as opposed to progressives in an area where they have just as good a chance of winning.
Yeah.
Maybe in some instances better. If you believe the polling, than the conservative or the Democrat, essentially. And people now know that Cuomo did this with the IDC, and I think in many respects the Congress people that we have in New York who have been in leadership positions in the Democratic Party have also functioned in some way to provide cover for the lack of sort of leaning into by the Democrats. Because if these guys are doing it, and they're in New York and they're in a safe blue seat, then, of course, the marginal district, the, +5 Democrats, they can't be expected to vote for this measure. So there's crazy. A lot of that going on. But
I was just looking at the Grace Meng, just Grace Meng in particular, because I just endorsed her challenger. I couldn't believe what really drew me in was she's a vice chair of the Democratic Party, DNC, and she votes more to the right than existing Republicans, and she's representing the most diverse district in the country in Queens.
That's Meeks is another guy.
Yep. Oh yeah.
There's a lot of that, and but we'll talk a little bit more about that in the fun half. Also, don't forget, check out the Antifada. We got a lot of things happening. Jamie's going to be gone this weekend, so head over and check out what they've got offered. She's got a lot of stuff she mentioned yesterday. And, of course, Literary Hangover, their new Twitch stream is burning up the interwebs. Isn't that right, Matt?
Yeah, it definitely is. I played Red Dead last night, and we learned about how the managerial revolution happened on the Wild West after the Civil War. So it was desperados and outlaws, and then the managers came and sewed things up for the trains and basically those sorts of interests.
It's not Friday, but let me recommend, Matt, I presume you've watched this movie, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid.
My dad probably has. I was never a big Western guy.
Dude, check it out. That's the story of Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid.
Cool. All right.
Bob Dylan did the soundtrack for that.
Well, he was in the movie too.
Whole record, yeah.
The only Western I've seen.
Heaven's Door came from.
Yes, it did.
Have you seen The Searchers, Sam?
Yeah, I've seen The Searchers. But I just know what I'm talking about. All right. The point is that I am telling you, it is very in tune with what you're talking about. It's first of all,
I'll check it out.
It's peck and paw.
Oh, nice. I know what that means.
You know what peck and paw means?
Yeah, ultra violent, right?
Well, no, not ultra violent. No, it's a little bit it's a little bit violent, but it's not gory in any way. But it talks about what that dynamic in the West. All right, whatever.
No, I'm totally intrigued.
Wait, the only thing I can add was where they.
I just never really got into Westerns because I'm from North Dakota, so it just seemed like, I don't know, like
I think it
too close to home. Maybe
Dakotas.
That's the problem. I didn't see Fargo until I moved to New York either.
That's hysterical.
I think this Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid takes place in the Dakotas. All right, whatever. I'll have your dad. I'll talk about it with your dad.
Like
folks, we're going to take a quick break. 646-257-3920. 646-257-3920 is the number we have. Also, I will set up the IM machine right now as we speak and see you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous. You're a little bit upset. You're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
It's a good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 8s. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance.
Ooh.
Rand Paul. I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey! Shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is the fun half with me, of course, Nomiki Const. Nomiki Const. You tell me.
No, you got it the second time around. It just took you. Yeah. I don't know,
What,
Sam.
Nomiki
I don't know what
Const?
to do. Yeah.
Nomiki?
Nomiki. There's no ma. It's no, me. You can repeat after me.
Isn't that
No,
how I used to say it?
No.
Nomiki?
There you go.
I thought that's how I see. That's what happens. Is then I think like, oh wait, now that's how I used to say it, and I say it incorrectly.
I can't even keep track. I just know that someone did a meme, which was hilarious.
I saw that.
That was good.
I know. I
Keep
feel
them
bad
coming,
about
people.
it. I mean, if you want to call me Same for a while, that's fine.
Wait, what? Just Sam?
Same.
Oh, Sam. People don't call you same.
Same.
Are you kidding?
Setter.
That's perfect. I'll call you Setter.
Sater. I get it all. All right, let's go over this. This is obviously we have a increasing, this, you're in Arizona, an increasing just the revving up of the infection rate of a coronavirus in states like Arizona. We're seeing it in Texas. 16 states, I think, now have a 2-week are starting to increase. Fortunately, we're not seeing deaths. Deaths tend to be a lagging indicator. However, there's also reason to believe that the people who are getting it are less likely to die. So that is I guess you could say a positive, but we still don't know the long-term implications of getting this as a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old. I mean, you go into the hospital, you may be dealing with this for the rest of your life. That said,
go ahead.
Well, that said, let's take a look at Donald Trump. There's this question of testing, because the other day when he was in Oklahoma, he said specifically, and he said this before, I told him to slow down the testing because all you get with testing is an awareness of how many people have it. Here he is. I don't know if this is what they were hoping to happen when he goes on this media tour he did, but here he is with a reporter from Scripps TV. Audio. There we go. We'll try that again. Here he is with reporter of Scripps TV, George St. Jean, I believe is his name. George St. Jean.
Slow the testing down to improve the numbers. Saturday night, you said that you told your staff to slow the testing down to improve the numbers. Does that mean someone watching this right now on their local news is not going to get a test because you asked your staff?
We do more testing than any country in the world by far. 25 million tests. Other countries do 1 million. Every time you do a test, as you do more tests, it shows more and more cases. So we're so far advanced, both in terms of the quality and the amount. And we're doing all these tests, and it shows cases. If other countries aren't doing, or if we did slow it down, we wouldn't show nearly as many cases. You're showing people that are asymptomatic. You're showing people that have very little problem. You're showing young people that don't have a problem. But we're doing so much testing, 25 million tests. Nobody thought that was possible.
But did you ask to slow it down?
If it did slow down, frankly, I think we're way ahead of ourselves, if you want to know the truth. We've done too good a job. Because every time we go up with 25 million tests, you're going to find more people. So then they say, we have more cases in the United States. The reason we have more cases because we do more testing than any other country by far.
It's just not.
If they were hoping that he was going on there to refute and clarify this, guess what? It didn't work. He all but admitted, look, let me explain to you why we're slowing down the testing. Because if you're asymptomatic, we don't want to know that you have it.
Yeah.
Even though we know that asymptomatic people tend to be the most infectious of others because they don't stay at home. They go out and spread it around.
This is maddening. I mean, not only is it just false, just straight up false, whether we've produced more tests or not, in a country our size compared to South Korea. Every country right now that's allowing people in, test people when they get off planes. They put them in court. That's just not, they're testing everybody. This is absolute propaganda crap.
It's almost not even propaganda because he's being very explicit about it. He's just complaining that, look, it's just, this cuts against me when we test, so I don't want to do it. So here is Brian Kilmeade brings him on to sort of say would you, just clarify what you were saying? And here it is.
So I asked him, do you want to expand on that?
We got so good at testing. What we did is a miracle between the ventilators and all of the things we did. But we got so good at testing that we've done 25 million tests. We've done 20 or 21 million more than Germany and these other countries. If you do more tests, that means you're going to have more cases. So we've done so good that we're showing we have a lot of cases. And everyone's saying they have more cases. Well, we have more cases because we have more testing. So they can test a kid who's got sniffles and is going to be better in about 2 hours because, you know, the young kids have done unbelievably well. Their immune system, I guess, or whatever is stronger. So when you do 25 million tests, you're going to show you have cases. And by doing all those tests, while it's good to do them in one way, in another way, it makes us look bad, and it's crazy.
But you don't mean, do you mean slow down testing?
No, I don't mean slow down, but if we did slow down, or if we didn't do so many, let's say instead of 25 million tests, we did 5 million tests, we'd be very low in cases right now.
Oh,
and everybody
my
would say, isn't that wonderful? By doing so much and being so advanced, not only did we do a lot of testing, but we're far more advanced than any other. We have the 5-minute test. We have tests that they don't even think of, other countries. You know, you hear about South Korea. They're always congratulating me on the great job I've done with testing. But the media, the fake news, doesn't get the word out. That's why it's good to speak to you. So we've done 25 million tests. That means we show a lot of cases. And that's all fine, but it makes us look bad, even though it should make us look good.
Right.
A lot of times when you explain the joke, it's not so funny.
Yeah. I guess that's not really, I mean, do you want to expand on that thing that everybody is horrified that you're saying? Yes, in fact, I do. Here it is. Now, just to put a fine point on this, Talking Points Memo is now reporting that the feds are about to bail on supporting COVID testing sites in Texas and other states.
What?
Yes. Out of a starting number of 41 sites, 13 remain in operation across 5 states, including Texas's 7, Illinois and New Jersey each have 2, while Colorado and Pennsylvania have each 1. Like Texas, Colorado will lose its federally supporting testing sites at the end of June, with testing kits and personnel leaving. So it's not just that he told them to slow it down, it's that they continue to slow it down.
It's if the numbers aren't high in these states.
I look at that.
Well, because I'm in one of these states right now. It's horrifying. I mean, I walk out. I told you this. And by the way, I just want to remind you, I won the pool. Just want to put that out there.
Yes, you did. We will get to that in a moment.
But the reason is I'm walking around in a state that is a purple state, frankly, and I'm in a blue city in Tucson, and no one's wearing masks. The restaurants, I've been to restaurants, you know, we sit outside, we find a really distant seat, and the other night I went to a restaurant with my mother, who's immunocompromised, and we went to sit really far away. We had our masks on, we're in open air, and they're putting people right up against us. And I actually made a little bit of a fit, and I said, you know, is there any way we could move seats and not be around people? They're just delusional. I mean, it's not. So if the numbers aren't being, if that isn't an indicator enough for these folks to be worried, right, then he's just going to pretend that it's not, the numbers aren't high by shutting down these sites. It's an alternate reality. So he comes into Arizona and wins Arizona or other states. This is all an electoral strategy, and it's horrifying.
It's horrifying. And frankly, I don't know how this electoral strategy plays out. I mean, I guess presumably they think that this is going to make the economy come roaring back. But I find that hard to believe. And presumably he thinks that maybe he thinks he cannot win, but for the economy coming back. I'm not sure that is going to be determinative. I mean, people have a sense that he has handled this poorly. Yeah. And I don't know that that's going to go away in 3 or 4 months. And in fact, I would argue that part of the reason why we saw what we saw with Barr and Berman in the Southern District of New York is because Trump is concerned that he is going to lose the election. Yeah. And he wants to make sure that those investigations end before January 20th in 2021, because he wants those investigations wrapped up. Anybody who could have leverage over him, like Rudy Giuliani, small fine, get that done, no double jeopardy, boom, and that's it. I think that's what's going on there, but who knows? All right, should we get to this? I don't know what, if we didn't really place a bet. But Matt, Brendan, maybe you should stop hiding behind your printed names and show your faces. because we all have to basically concede to Nomi that she was right on the guess of what the percentage would be of people wearing face masks at the Tulsa rally.
Congratulations.
Yeah, all right. Look at Brendan got a haircut. I didn't even
I
see
did.
that.
No, look at that.
Oh, wow.
No.
Did you do that yourself?
No, my girlfriend back here did it.
Oh, congrats.
There she goes. Good job.
She's like, I can't hear anything.
They're saying good
What's
job
going
on the haircut.
All right. Well, I mean, we didn't really come up with like what we were going to do for what Nomi was going to win. So I think maybe maybe a round of applause. Is that?
Oh, really? That's it? Really?
Well, what you want a mug?
A round of applause?
How about a mug? Maybe we get her a majority.
Yeah, we'll get her
mug.
some merch.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank
we'll
you,
get it.
guys.
All right,
so
well
much.
done.
A mask, a vaccine, something.
There was, I would say, there was probably close to 1%, if
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, 1% would be what? Out of what did they say ultimately? Was it like 6,000 people who were there?
I have no sense. I mean, it seemed to me that the people that were working, all the videos I saw, it was like the people opening the gates had the masks. I think there was
But
one
we were
woman I
talking
saw.
about attendees.
Yeah.
And all
I
the
get
reporters. I mean,
Okay.
it could have been 3%. Like that would have been
Yeah.
what, like 180 people if it was 6,200 people there. 180 would be like 3%. I think it could have been 3%.
And they crammed them in like sardines, like when they were coming through the entrance. I don't know if you saw that one video.
I did. I guess
Well, it's
we'll
okay
find
because
out.
in a couple days it's going to happen here in Arizona too. So we'll all be fine.
Well, don't worry. They figured out how to kill it with that special church has a thing. So don't worry about that. That's going to be taken care of. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 260 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 260. You there? 260. Let's see. Maybe that's me. Maybe it's my problem. Let's go to 409 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, this is Mr. Toro from Texas.
Mr. Toro from Texas. What's on your mind?
So in Texas, we've got the same problem that Namiki has. We've got no mask. You can go to a grocery store and not see a single mask. I'm east of Houston, and it's just now the governor's trying to get on the community to wear them, but it's just that ship has sailed. So we have the same problem, Sam, but really what I was calling about was your y'all's discussion on Joe Rogan yesterday. That was from the Brett Weinstein interview, and to put that in proper context, Brett goes on, tying everything under the sun to Black Lives Matter. And Joe was attempting to try to push back, but he really can't. And I just wanted to kind of mention that because it's important. Brett ties all different sorts of things that no one would have any idea about, just broadly speaking. And he does a decent job in getting Joe to sort of come to his side on it. Joe keeps pushing back, but I think the context of that's very important.
So, in other words, Brett is saying that there are a host of other problems, or that he sees the Black Lives Matter as problematic?
He's tying anything you could think of to Black Lives Matter. So, for example, the sort of defund STEM movement. There was a whole host of other things that he ties to it that the average person would have virtually no idea. And Sam, I see this in Texas a lot. I'm in sort of a red area, and you see people sort of tying anything they see to Black Lives Matter. So there'll be a video of 4 black guys beating up a white guy, and it's Black Lives Matter. I mean, it's absurd, but this is sort of what we're dealing with, is anything that occurs is tied to Black Lives Matter. And in the beginning, that wasn't happening, but as things went on, that's the pushback that I'm seeing. And Black Lives Matter is a movement without a leader. I mean, it's not, you can't tie every single thing that occurs to Black Lives Matter, but that's what's happening.
Well, I mean, that is, I mean, it's not surprising that you're seeing that you're going to have pushback, right? I mean, and it's got to exaggerate the threat the threat can't just be that we're going to have police who are not going to be harassing black people. Like, that doesn't feel like a threat. So there has to be an exaggerated, there has to be a threat that is developed by the presence of Black Lives Matter.
I noticed
he attempts to tie it to Evergreen. Yeah. He attempts to tie it to all sorts of different things.
Yeah, he's
nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
look, the original day of absence that he got so dramatic about at Evergreen was actually about like disarming the police on campus. Like he's a reverse race, in my opinion, he's a reverse racist provocateur. Right. And he's been courting media, like even before the Evergreen like day of absence thing, he was one of the few votes against diverse hiring at Evergreen. So like I think the pattern is like this guy is what he is.
Yeah.
Appreciate the call, Mr. Toro. Let's go to 312 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Kevin from Chicago.
Kevin from Chicago. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I just want to talk about something I feel like I haven't heard anybody mention, that during the speech in Tulsa, Trump said that flag burners should go to jail for a year. And there was like a landmark case like 31 years ago in the Supreme Court, Texas versus Johnson, that ruled that flag burning was protected by the First Amendment.
Right.
Yeah, he doesn't care. I mean, this is, he is desperate to find the culture war issue that he needs. Appreciate the phone call. I mean,
what if we burned a Confederate flag? I mean, I'm sure he'd be outraged over burning a Confederate flag because that's, that is free speech.
But I mean, I think that's, I think he's flailing around. I mean, I think that I mentioned this the other day. Dave Weigel made the point that there was no T-shirts about Joe Biden at this rally. All the T-shirts were Clinton T-shirts and anti-Democrats T-shirts, but there was no Joe Biden T-shirts. And I think he's like desperate to figure out what his hook is going to be. And they've been trying Antifa, and they've been trying, he's afraid to go Black Lives Matter, although I think they're going to get back on that train. He went to immigration today by shutting out high-skilled immigrants, ostensibly to help U.S. workers. But, of course, so-called low-skilled immigrants, okay. So who he's helping out is no problem. He's got no problem just helping out the wealthy donors. Speaking of which, Martha McSally.
Oh yes,
she's in she seems to be a little bit concerned about her reelection numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And she made a proposal. I guess it was yesterday, right?
Yep.
To provide for taxpayers $8,000 per couple.
That's amazing.
In vacation tax credits plus $500 per kid. Now, everybody would love an $8,000 vacation. I have never in my entire life taken an $8,000 vacation. That would be great. But to get an $8,000 tax credit, plus for my two kids, $9,000, you need to make a considerable amount of money that could be a tax credit. This is not a refundable tax credit. Right. In other words, you don't actually get the money if you don't pay it in taxes. You have to pay into it. This is a tax break for wealthy people.
Absolutely.
And we're going to subsidize, according to her, wealthy people's $8,000 vacation.
I think she's trying to win over the business community in Arizona who's just turned on Trump. I really think that's the angle here, that she's trying to win over the cinema-like voters because, that's her whole jam. That's, there's a lot of very wealthy, like moderate conservatives in this state. And I think people think everyone's like Trump, but it's not. It's a very independent-leaning, libertarianish state. And I think that was the angle with that she didn't actually want to be linked to Trump.
Where are you going to go and spend an $8,000 vacation? Like, how much money do you have to spend $8 or $9 grand on a vacation. I mean, look, folks do it. That's great. God, God be with you. But I mean, I don't even know how you do that. Like, where do you go?
I'm sure rich people can figure it out. They can fly to New Zealand and hang out with all the libertarian Elon Musk types.
A lot of people from going to New Zealand for that, to get that tax break. That's pretty good. Will you just break down to us, what do you think is going to be the most important races in New York State? I mean, obviously we have a big race in Kentucky, Charles Booker versus Amy McGrath. That is going to be, look, this, according to the polls, Booker has a better shot than McGrath against McConnell. I don't know if either one of them has a shot.
Right.
But what it will do is it will also indicate just how misguided Chuck Schumer is when he starts handing out essentially these huge checks, and he doesn't literally hand them out, but he steers his donors there to a candidate who was, basically talking about working with Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how tone deaf you can get, but that seems pretty tone deaf to me. But in New York, what are we looking at? What's important in New York in terms of New York politics, but also how that will impact national politics?
I mean, there's a lot. Listen, the most I live in technically the most progressive in terms of concentration of voters district in the country, neighborhood in the country, in Astoria, New York. The AOC represents part of Astoria, New York, in Queens. And I think there's a lot of shape-shifting happening in that area, and it's affecting Queens politics, which affects citywide politics. And so, which of course affects national. So the kinds of stuff that's happening just at a local level is we have this thing called the Queens Borough President. There's 5 boroughs in New York. I am a big supporter of one of the candidates named Costa Constantinidis, a good Greek boy, but he is my councilman, and he is, I believe, the most progressive council person in the country. He's been a huge climate activist. After many, many years, he got something passed in the city council, which was absurd that it wasn't before, which is banning and limiting the biggest cause of greenhouse gases in New York comes from buildings because they leak out natural gas. And so he was behind that bill to cut that. And so that's a really interesting race that probably nobody's aware of outside of Queens, but has huge implications. He's sort of like the manager of Queens. And that signals that the machine, because he's not the machine candidate, but he actually used to be part of the machine, as everybody did in New York, that signals that is going to be shifting very rapidly. And that affects the congressional district, which is Carolyn Maloney's district. She's been there for 3 decades. She represents the Upper East Side, Lower East Side, into a little part of Brooklyn and Astoria and Roosevelt Island. So, Upper East Side is probably the richest part of New York, or traditionally has been the most, wealthy part of New York. And it's, I think it would be a big deal if progress was affecting the Upper East Side through Queens. So right. There's a few challengers there. I'm supporting Lauren Ashcraft, who is a socialist. She's running against her. The Nadler race is super interesting because I think, Nadler has recently owned this whole progressive reputation, and AOC endorsed him, but I just don't agree. I think he is representative of the machine that still exists. There's different machines all over the city. He was not placed there. He was placed here through county committee, which is this ridiculous process where party basically chooses who the next candidate's going to be by like party vote, because party line is something that's not state regulated. It's party regulated. So Nadler's been there for like 30 years, passed nothing, like three pieces of legislation. And it's the Upper West Side, into West Side Manhattan. These are the most unequal districts in the country. So let's just put this in perspective. In New York City, in Manhattan. And you have no-shows. The Meeks race is fascinating. Greg Meeks he's probably going to win, but he represents the machine now in Queens. He took over for Crowley's position in party politics. Very, very diverse district. It's, it hasn't had the progressive shift that Western Queens has. And then I think a race that not enough people are paying attention to, but I am fascinated by it is the one against Tom Suozzi, who is caucusing with Republicans, like actually caucusing with Republicans. This is the seat that Steve Israel, who used to be the head of the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, had. So it is a Democratic seat. It is so much of a Democratic seat that the former head of the DCCC represented that district. Right. So people argue Suozzi's conservative because he needs to be. That's just BS. A few years ago, Steve Israel was the rep.
Where is this seat?
This is a slice of Queens into Long Island. And Melanie DeRigo, who's an extraordinary candidate, is running against him, has him scared. But I think, the big factor here is, are all of these candidates, and these are just a few, going to be able to bring out the voters that they need when we are dealing with COVID? And I think a lot of oxygen is being pulled into the Jamal Bowman race, rightfully so, but we can't forget coalitions help us win these races. And I just wish we could spread a little bit more energy to some of the other seats that have as much of an impact, if not maybe more in some cases, than the Bowman seat, which is really, really important. I don't want to denounce that. It's just, I'm seeing a lot of these candidates hustle very hard in the midst of COVID. And they've been running for 16, 17 months in some cases, quit their jobs. And then the one in the Bronx, the open seat, Serrano's seat, with tons of candidates. But Samalise Lopez, a friend of mine for years, is running, and she's really picked up a lot of momentum in the final stretch. But goes back to our point a few weeks ago that supporting candidates early makes a big difference. And now the money's flowing in, but will that make a difference? Don't know. It's COVID.
All right. Well, you'll be doing coverage later tonight, too, as those tallies start to trickle in, I guess.
Yeah.
So, and part of the reason why they're going to trickle in, I think, is because there's over 1 million ballots that were sent out, absentee ballots. Something like 2 million in Kentucky, and they've gotten back, I think, like 900,000, or maybe it's 900,000 in New York and 500,000 in Kentucky. I mean, never concerned at the idea of mail-in ballots. I'm not exactly sure if his fear is well-founded. Like, it's not clear that mail-in ballots necessarily help Democratic candidates. I mean, it's just not clear that that's happening.
Yeah. Mail-in. Oh, sorry.
Here we go.
Go ahead.
Respectfully, sir, I covered politics in Colorado for 5 years. This morning you tweeted about how mail-in ballots will be fraudulent, but I never did a story or heard your friend Senator Cory Gardner say that mail-in ballots are fraudulent. People in Colorado have been voting by mail for years, sir. Any specific evidence? Where is the specific evidence that there
are thousands of cases all over. Thousands. I don't like the system, and I did pretty well in Colorado. Could have won Colorado. But I could have won. I almost.
Do you blame mail-in ballots for?
I can't tell you what it is. I thought I would have won Colorado, frankly. I love Colorado, and the people like me, and we have a lot of the similar values. We're doing a lot of economic development there. A lot of things are planned. No, I don't like mail-in ballots. I don't think it's good for Colorado either. I don't know. Did they find anything in Colorado? I can tell you this. There are thousands of cases all over an example. All over the country you have thousands of cases. A friend of mine gets a ballot. His son, unfortunately, passed away 7 years ago. He gets a ballot for his son to vote. That's one case.
Oh my God.
But there are thousands and thousands of cases. The other thing is with mail-in ballots, people can forge them. Foreign countries can print them. They get the same paper, the same press.
Why don't you order them to have Americans print the ballots then?
I'm not ordering anything. We shouldn't have mail-in ballots. You should have certain things. If you can't be at a location, like I'm here and I can't vote in Florida, I'm at the White House. So you do something where that's taken care of, and that works out fine. But in California, they sent tens of millions of slips out, of ballots out. They put them in mailboxes, people take them. They take them from the mailman, and they print them. They fraudulently print them. It's a very bad system. It's going to lead to a tremendous fraud, and we're trying to stop it. Mail-in ballots are a disaster, and I'm sure they're not good in Colorado.
So just to be clear, I mean, I don't know how they do this in the other states, to be honest with you, but I can tell you in New York, you fill out your ballot, and then you put it in an envelope that has your name on it, and you mail it back to the
Board of Elections.
County Board of Elections.
Or the 2 envelopes.
Yeah.
Well, yes, it's 2 envelopes. So there's one envelope is the interior envelope where your name is on it, and then the other, so your vote gets recorded.
I'm so worried I didn't do that now.
And well, but the point being that if a foreign country were to print up a bunch of extra ballots, how would they send them in? It's not like there's just like they put a box out in front of the Board of Election and you just drop it in like it's a suggestion, or a vote for Employee of the Week or something. All the ballots are counted for. Like, you would have to know everybody who's not voting.
Right.
Print up a ballot, put it in their name, put it into the envelope that you've also printed up for that county or state, I guess, fill everything out correctly, and then send it in. It's unbelievable. But he
has to match. He knows this is going to work on the dumb people, and it's going to be repeated. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, they're saying that's like saying voting is bad for Republicans. I mean, ultimately, it's about suppression. We know this. The voter roll, as broken as the Board of Elections is in New York State and New York City, we still have paper ballots, which is a great thing. It's not scanner paper ballots. It's actual paper ballots. We're not using these machines, even electronic machines, in our normal elections. So the voter roll is going to match. Now, we have a lot of issues in our registry, which is a whole other thing, but it is never about I just don't understand their logic of like giving people the opportunity to vote is voter suppression. It's just everybody bipartisan says that there's no lean when it comes to mail-in ballots. I mean, they have them in Florida. They have them in Georgia.
I mean, part of it could just be, I mean, first of all, I think he believes this on some level. I don't think he's like, I'm going to be able to dupe the dupes. I think he's a dupe himself. But I also think the idea is that by talking about how paper ballots are bad, he also sets the ground for not accepting the results. And I think there's a certain amount of that going on. I mean, here's another question. Why is Trump doing all these? He's got to be in a little bit of panic right now, right? I mean, that's why he's doing 3 interviews, all from the wherever it is. I don't know if it's in the West Wing or whatever, outdoors there. Here he is. He did one with Scripps TV. He did one with Fox, and he also did one with the Christian Broadcast Network, David Brody. And of course, again, this is also, I think, indicative of the difficulty the Republicans are having in creating a narrative about Joe Biden. Mm-hmm. And so he's flailing around looking for anything. He wants to play the greatest hits again. And I'm surprised he's not talking about investigating Hillary Clinton. However, he is talking about how he would really like to charge Barack Obama with treason.
As I said, I would ask about the deep state, which has been after you for a long time. On Obama and the spying situation, this idea that they were spying on your campaign, you've been asked before about what crime he would have potentially committed. But I remember you talking to
treason. Treason.
That's what I was going to ask.
It's treason. Look, when I came out a long time ago, I said they've been spying on my campaign. Mm-hmm. I said they've been taping, and that was in quotes, meaning a modern day version of taping. It's all the same thing, but a modern day version. But they've been spying on my campaign. I told you that a long time ago. Turned out I was right. Let's see what happens to him now. Durham is... I never met Durham because I want to stay out of it because otherwise it's going to look political. But Durham, as you know, is a highly respected person. And Bill Barr is doing a great job as Attorney General. Let's see what they come up with. But they don't have to tell me. All I have to do is read the papers, the insurance policy. In case she doesn't win, we got an insurance policy. Well, that was all the stuff that we went through over the last, let's say, 2.5 years. Now we caught him. We caught him called Strzok and Page, the two lovers. Brennan and Clapper, the way they lied.
Democrats can't stand Barr.
Comey.
They just...
They can't stand who?
Bill Barr. They just think he's political.
You know why? Because he's doing such a good job. Because he's law and order. but he's got them in his crosshairs. And now we have to see what's going to happen. I will say this, if it were reversed, and if the other side sat, we're at the Oval Office, right in that chair behind the Resolute desk, and it was the opposite, 2 years ago, 25 people would have been convicted, and they would be sent to jail for 50 years. And by the way, if it were 100 years ago or 50 years ago, they would have been executed. But we're in a different time.
Yes.
We're in a different time. You understand what I mean by that?
Oh, my God.
They spied on the opposing party's campaign, and we caught them.
Whoa.
Execution. I mean, wasn't that what? Wasn't Nixon spying on McGovern?
We're in a different time, Sam.
We didn't execute him, did we?
Well, it's different. We had a black president, and I think we know where he's going with that.
He's gone bat crap crazy, and I think it's part of it is just they don't he doesn't know how to attack Biden.
Wait, what I don't understand is how is it treason? First off, he wasn't the president at the time. So just by definition, if he's even going to go down that path, it was a campaign. I mean, even if he did do it, how is that treason?
You can't go against Trump.
That's right. Yeah.
It's a treason against God in a way.
Well, clearly the host there was a representative of God, so he was backing him up.
Wow, they really on CBN they really go full bore. It really is funny insane. How you could sort of gradate going from Scripps to Fox to the Christian Broadcast Network is somewhere down here, I think. That's really something.
But they've got to be in trouble with the base.
I think they're trying to hit all three sort of I want to say quadrants, but obviously it's not quadrants, tritrents, but I'm not sure. But I think they're worried. I think they're worried about the base. And I think that's why they go, they talk about Obama and that treason and that stuff, but they're running out of stuff.
Well, I mean, what's concerning to me, though, is, and granted, this just could have been out of fear of, not dying, the rally, with as low numbers as he got, he still has much higher enthusiasm than Joe Biden. And
without doubt, there's no doubt in my mind. I mean, I don't know that Joe Biden could get 6,000 people, certainly not, in this coronavirus environment. Yeah. But the enthusiasm for Joe Biden is not what Joe Biden's counting on.
Right.
To get people to vote. What they're counting on is the enthusiasm to vote against Donald Trump. Now, in 2016, it didn't work out, that strategy, in part because they were able to not just make people unenthusiastic, not everybody, not even the majority of people. Obviously, the majority of people voted for Hillary Clinton, but enough in key areas, not just to be unenthusiastic about it, just to dampen their enthusiasm to vote against Trump by making it less than a referendum. But this is going to be a referendum on Trump. I mean, I think it's quite clear. Will they be able to, through a mix of different things, win in a couple of states by a razor-thin margin that will flip the Electoral College? I hope not. I don't think so, but we know what happened last time.
Well, then the enthusiasm, hatred for Hillary is what they used as a weapon.
Exactly. And they don't have that this time.
Yeah.
There may be a sort of ambivalence about Joe Biden, but it's ambivalence. That is they're amongst those people. The intense disdain for Trump, I think, is going to be greater. But they're trying everything. They're trying everything to scare. And this is the problem, is that they are trying to scare the American public into, and the problem is that Donald Trump is not providing any type of answer, and Joe Biden's not associated with these people. Joe Biden has made it very clear that he was not a progressive. And so they can't, or not, leaning into any of this. And so let's play this. This is Steve Doocy. He's got Tammy Bruce on. You know who she is, right?
Yes, yeah.
She's a Fox News commentator. And this stuff is all well and good, but it doesn't have any political salience at this point. I think it's good for ratings for Fox, but I don't think it's good in terms of getting Donald Trump elected. Here is Tammy Bruce with Steve Doocy bemoaning the fact that statues are not permanent.
Tammy, this seems to be the number one topic in America right now. The president has tweeted out, he signed an executive order this morning as well, protecting things on federal property. Are there some symbols, some statues that may have outlived their message and need to come down?
Here's one of the problems we're dealing with now is that this is a conversation that is not limited even to that. And it's about Marxism. And the people controlling the narrative at this point is determined to cast everything in America's history, much of which has been difficult and bad. We had to have a civil war to correct a process that was going on to end slavery. But the dynamic with Marxists is not to actually have a large conversation within the community and within America, which we've been having from our beginning. This is about erasing our past in its entirety. But more than that, even, Steve, it's about condemning us with no room for forgiveness. If you've noticed all the condemnation about systemic racism and Americans are racist and this, that, and the other thing, it is a condemnation, but with no space for reconciliation. And that's what's happening right now. They want the conversation to be about, those people were bad and obviously they were defeated. But we've seen this trend, Steve, right? It's gone from an argument about Confederate statues to Gandhi was defaced, right? Andrew Jackson, Lincoln, the Lincoln Memorial at first, a Lincoln statue, because inevitably, look.
Just throw them all out there.
It was not the Lincoln Memorial that was defaced.
It's not.
But Andrew Jackson, yeah. Oh, that guy! I would tear that down and get him off the what is he on the 20 the 5? Get him off the.
Did we already decide on that?
Our currency as well.
Yeah, his statue's the worst part in New Orleans.
Jackson should be pulled down. But you notice what's fascinating is she couldn't even answer the question from Steve Doocy. When Steve Doocy asks you a question that you have to avoid, you've got a problem. Like, he puts it out there. Isn't it like the case that it's possible there are statues whose values now are not consistent, that what we're praising is no longer consistent, that we have some, measure of awakening. We have what she was calling for, right? Like the notion of being able to, some redemption, as it were, and that they're not appropriate for the time. And she can't even answer that question. She's going to go on this extended thing about Marxists and.
Yeah, Marx corresponded with Lincoln too, so I don't know that he would be in support of tearing all the statues of him down. I don't think it stems from Marxism, is what I'm trying to say.
No, it's for them, it's some type of cultural Marxism. But what kind of trouble are you in that if you can't? Steve Doocy's coming up with a question that you have to avoid and filibuster around.
And she's supposedly a Democrat on the show. That's what's. Oh yeah, you didn't know that? Tammy Bruce is a Democrat.
No,
or at least she. Obviously she's not. Right. Not in real life, but in character she is. That's her. She fills in for Laura Ingraham. So whatever that land is, right there. She has the nerve to say that we don't come to the table wanting to have a conversation. Number one, your table's been set by a bunch of Nazis, so you want to negotiate, you fill in for Laura Ingraham, an actual Nazi. My whole thing is, bottom line, if these statues came up after they lost, we shouldn't even be having a conversation. That is about reinventing history. If you put up a statue to Robert E. Lee after the Confederacy lost, it should go away. This isn't about reflecting on the losers of history who oppressed people.
40 years later.
40 years later.
Statues come
up.
And what is it that you are commemorating? I mean, look, if you want to put a statue up of a Confederate soldier to mark, and maybe a Union soldier to mark the time in this country where you had family member versus family member, or you had hundreds of thousands of people die in needlessly be in service of wealthy landowners who wanted to maintain their free labor, and maybe a union that wanted to increase taxation and wanted to diminish the economic power that the South had gotten from free labor. I mean, if that's your story, then fine. Put up a couple of statues that commemorate and in some way show some measure of regret that so many people had to die, in this instance. Okay, but the leaders of this, of the Confederacy, they're not doing it because, they've been told to do it. They're doing it because they full on believe in it, and they were savvy enough to know exactly what they were fighting for. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you want to make an argument that this is about culture, then, I don't know, put up a statue of a mint julep or something. But even then, I don't know. I don't know enough about mint julep and what that would represent. But I don't know. I just don't buy it. I just don't buy the heritage argument and the idea that we don't have statues that last forever.
No,
that's not what's going on there. I mean, we are correcting what as a society we want to celebrate.
It's what your children look to. It's what, we don't have statues of the victors, so I don't even know why we're having this conversation. The victors have been replaced by the statues of the losers who made money off of free labor and oppressing people. So I don't know. I mean, I think my frustration is it's who we choose to put statues up in instead of those who we should have our children and the next generation looking to in admiration. That's the frustrating part. Whose history is being represented here?
And people, and make no mistake about it, the historical value of these, as you walk around, is virtually nil. You don't understand the context in which these things are happening. It is about commemorating, not necessarily understanding and having a greater historical understanding of what's happening there. It is about celebrating. It is about venerating a tradition, not about making a more informed citizenry. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
The Nathaniel Bedford Forrest bust in the Tennessee state capitol was completed in 1978.
Wow.
It's just basically, would we today put up a big bronze Confederate flag, in the town square? Why would we do that? Why would we do that anywhere? Mm-mm. We wouldn't. It's absurd. Just because it happened, 60 years ago or 100 years ago, mm-hmm. It's absurd. Speaking of absurd, you ready for this one? Why did Bill Barr pretend that Jeffrey Berman, who was the acting U.S. attorney in the Southern District, why did Bill Barr pretend he was resigning? Why did so much so that Jeffrey Berman had to make a public announcement that he was not resigning? Jeffrey Berman, of course, investigating Rudy Giuliani, Michael Cohen, others within the Trump circle, looking into the Deutsche Bank loan, et cetera, et cetera. Why did he do all this? Well, I think the answer given by Kayleigh, what's her name again? Your buddy,
Kayleigh
right?
McEnany.
Yeah, it's going to surprise you. Listen to this.
Careful, he's not my buddy. Okay, correct the record.
I think that they were very much in sync this weekend, the Attorney General and the President, and here's what happened. The President held Mr. Clayton in very high regard, wanted to nominate him to this position in SDNY to keep him in the government as he returns to New York. Barr was working on a smooth transition, and when Berman chose to respond in the way that he did, he came to the President, and the President agreed and fired this individual, Mr. Berman, as Mr. Clayton now will, in time, get to that position.
But why was Mr. Berman being dismissed in the first place?
Because Mr. Clayton wanted to go back to New York City. We wanted to keep him in government, and therefore he was given the position at SDNY.
But why did the president, I have two questions, but why did the president say he wasn't involved in the firing of Jeff Berman when the Attorney General said the president was the one who fired him?
Because the Attorney General was taking the lead on this matter. He did come to the president and report to him when Mr. Berman decided not to leave, and at that point is when the president agreed with the decision of the Attorney General and to fire Mr. Berman and to promote Mr. Clayton.
So he was involved in it then?
He was involved in a sign-off capacity. He was not, AG Barr was leading the way, but in a sign-off capacity, yes, the president was.
So get this now. They are deciding who is going to lead perhaps the most important U.S. Attorney's office in the country, certainly the most esteemed one and the most independent, the one that is handling all these investigations of people around the president, as well as some of the most important federal prosecutions that we have in the country. They have decided that they're going to force the guy in charge of that out. Like a human resources, Clayton really wants to live in New York again. And
Great time to live in New York, by the way. Great time.
You can't find another good. Yeah, he wants to get back to New York in time for the second wave. And so we really need to get him back in there, and we didn't know how else to keep him in government. And so we fired the head of the Southern District of Manhattan.
Unbelievable.
I mean, that's just like, how is there not audible gasps in that press pool room when she says that? That people are like, are you really telling us that's the reason why you went through all this, was because the guy at the SEC wanted to move back to New York and you wanted to keep him in. What?
There's also huge SEC offices in New York. Like, you don't need to relocate him to another department. Why would there be
huge SEC offices? Why would the Security Exchange Commission be in New York, where the New York Stock Exchange is?
Is that actually, I mean, thinking about it from that level, like, is there something going on there? Is there an investigation that maybe it's a business signal? I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too deep into it, but
I mean, maybe they want to get Clayton out of the SEC. I've heard different things about Clayton in terms of, like, his background. I can tell you that he also coincidentally was an attorney for Deutsche Bank at one point. He may be the type of guy who, although, if I had to guess, I would bet that he probably was a Clinton voter in 2016. But he also may be the type of guy who's like, well, you don't want to get involved with the banks, even if Trump was there, because that stuff, that's not a priority. I mean, who knows? But the idea that they're trying to sell, we had the guy who's in charge of the SEC really wanted to go back to New York, so we just fired the head of the Southern District of Manhattan's office.
I feel like she made that up on the spot, though. It was like one of her little CNN moments where she would, just say it, this is straight from the source. Do you remember in 2016 and beyond, the mental gymnastics, and people would just sit there with the audible gasps at the lengths she would go to defend Donald Trump. She's smart. She's, she graduated Harvard Law.
She walks off that podium and goes like, I can't believe I said that, and I can't believe I got away with it.
No, I think she thinks, I won that argument today. Like, it's mock trial. Like, oh, I had to take this position today? No.
Nuts. All right, lastly, let's take a look at what happened in Richmond last night.
Oh, jeez.
This, who was the person who, what was the name of the person who shot this footage, Brendan?
The Twitter user, not LeVar. That's all they're giving in terms of identification.
Okay, not LeVar. He gave permission to folks to use this. This is a little bit disturbing, folks. It goes from a peaceful protest to what looks like basically an urban battlefield in moments. They don't want them shooting, and that's why they put those lights in them. Is this the first clip? I thought that was 3 minutes. Oh, here we go.
What?
You can see that they're just firing these. I don't know if those are gas canisters.
Oh my God.
I mean, it's completely twisted now that if you have a bullet that is covered in rubber, it is just like you're just allowed to fire on these crowds. I mean, that is so twisted. It's unbelievable.
And this is not, I mean, the other thing about the media over the last few weeks, there was just too much to take in. And now they're just back to COVID, which is obviously a crisis. So this type of story isn't being covered now.
Yeah,
because we're just numb to it.
I mean, it really is nuts. And there's, I saw the other night a thread on Twitter of a young man who had basically lost sight in his eye. We've seen multiple occasions of that because they've been fired upon. Yeah. Guy who was apparently at a protest with his mom. And it's just, you think back to Kent State,
yes,
before who died there, and how much that became a rallying cry. Right. You've got the versions of this going on every night. The only difference is the bullets are covered with rubber, and so all that happens is people lose their eyesight. I mean, some people die. We've had some deaths associated with this, but people lose their eyesight. People become severely injured. And
brain damage.
It's just, well, that's what you get for protesting.
I was thinking back to Standing Rock, just watching that, which, when I was at Standing Rock, I remember being so shocked that these stories were not being put out there. And it was very similar. It was like, obviously this is happening everywhere, but there was something very, very similar about that visual right there, about how they were just moving forward no matter what. Moving forward, just shooting, no warning. And the smoke, and also feeling like it was just lost, like the store, no one was covering it. And eventually, yes, but it took a very long time before Standing Rock was covered. And even then, it was like more about the organizing rather than the violence that the police state was inflicting on people.
The only thing I can hope is that there's enough local coverage in places like this where, the people, I don't know, but that's the one thing you could hope. Meanwhile, so on one hand, you have these violent police assaults on protesters and very little coverage of this going on and telling these stories at this point. However, if you're a police department and you're convinced that you've been poisoned at Shake Shack by people putting bleach in your milkshake, very easy to get coverage. In fact, you could practically write the copy and just distribute it, apparently, to news outlets. Here's a clip edited together by a guy named Timothy Burke at Bubba Prague on Twitter of that very thing. This is ABC, NBC. Well, you'll see. Fox News.
Bleach reportedly dumped in their drinks as anti-police sentiment hits a boiling point. Police in New York say 3 officers were intentionally poisoned by workers at a Shake Shack in Manhattan.
3 New York police officers are in the hospital tonight after drinking milkshakes believed to have been poisoned with bleach.
And it appears bleach was poured into their milkshakes.
Police say 3 officers were poisoned by milkshakes at Shake Shack restaurant.
3 New York City police officers say they were poisoned at a Manhattan Shake Shack.
3 officers were intentionally poisoned by workers at a restaurant.
Officials say a foreign substance was placed in their drinks at a Shake Shack in Lower Manhattan.
Shake Shack employee poisoned 3 officers by pouring bleach into their milkshakes.
Intentionally poisoned at a Shake Shack.
And it believes this was intentional.
Intentionally poisoned.
Intentionally poisoned by 1 or more workers at the Shake Shack.
The officers were intentionally poisoned.
The officers were intentionally poisoned.
Intentionally poisoned.
People feel emboldened to put chemicals into a police officer's food.
Unbelievable.
There you have it. Absolutely zero evidence that any of that happened. And of course, a day or two later, the police quietly announced, no charges because it didn't happen. I mean, maybe they got sick. Maybe. I don't know.
So do you think this was something like maybe a couple of police officers actually, because the fact that the police force came forward and said it didn't happen means I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, that I don't think it came from the top. I think maybe there was potentially a couple of officers who thought they got sick and were poisoned and went there and they didn't investigate, and then it turns out it wasn't true and they had to cover them for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think the story here is just that all it takes is a police to sort of drop any type of theory out there, and it immediately gets reported as if it's absolutely true. Whereas every other incident that happens, requires strict scrutiny. But it also just goes to show that, look, if these guys somebody came up with the idea,
right,
that they got poisoned intentionally, and they said it. And so if these guys can come up with that idea and say that,
right,
something that is so easily disprovable, what else are they doing when they agree that, we need to hold the line?
That's what I'm saying.
A glimpse into it.
That's what I'm saying. So if it came from an officer and they immediately, instead of questioning, or maybe it wasn't from an officer, they act as a unit. They protect each other as a fraternity, and then it has devastating consequences as we see on a daily basis. So, I mean, how do you listen? Pat Lynch was there in that video saying it.
Yep.
He is toxic.
Yep. Pretty amazing stuff. All right, let's take a couple of IMs, and we'll take a couple of calls, and then we'll get out of here. Jonathan Armstead. Sam, have you been following Nathan Robinson's issue with the Hills Rising TV and Crystal and Sager?
Oof.
He has brought up some good points. Top amongst them is that we shouldn't be aligning with so-called right populists, even if they have issues with liberals, elitists, and the media, because in the end, they're going to slam illegal immigrants in defense of white ethno-state. I know he's been on before, but he's spot on and worth talking to about this. I mean, I haven't read his pieces on this exactly, but I agree with that sentiment. I think it's a real mistake. I think that there's times for transpartisan, if you will, or trans ideological, alliances on a specific issue. But in terms of broad philosophical principles to join up, because I mean, if you got a bill that you want passed,
right,
okay. But I'm not getting in league with people whose ideology ultimately leads to these type of things, and Tucker Carlson, whatnot. No, any more than I would with David Frum, because he's against Donald Trump.
Yes.
If he wants to say that Donald Trump is bad, great. And on that project, fine. But I'm not going to promote David Frum, because the next day he's going to talk about how we should be attacking Iran. The next day he's going to be talking about immigrants. So I have that same attitude. I don't care. I don't care about, Tucker Carlson saying a couple of good things about economic populism any more than I care about David Frum saying something that we should get rid of Donald Trump.
And I'll take it a step further. The Hill's owned by a right-winger. I believe in my heart, and I'm friends with Crystal, very good friends with her, I love her, but I believe in my heart that the right wing and the right populists and the right, the dark web and the neo-Nazis and all these forces know that they have a generational crisis, and they're using left populism and maybe some nativism that exists on the left as a vehicle to grow their movement. And I think that's how we get into fishy situations with Joe Rogan, who's hasn't explored in depth these ideas, and so he can be swayed one way or another very easily. And I think a lot of people are, because they're not professionally political. And if there is a space like the Hill, which again has its own motivations,
right?
So yes, it was great during the primary because it was a great outlet during the primary. But let's be real here. It was also a great political tool in the primary to attack who they thought might have been, the big establishment in the Democratic Party, because it's a right-wing owned publication.
Yeah,
right.
Who funds it?
Right, exactly. Now, I have a different problem with Rogan, because I don't think Rogan in any way funded by that. I mean, I think he's just fell in with some people, and sometimes, and I think it's just his understanding of politics, I think, will leave something to be desired. But in the case of the Hill, of course. And I think in the case of Tucker Carlson, of course, this is the game plan. I think it's calculated. I don't think that means that Crystal's involved in that calculation, right. But you get an opportunity and you pursue it. And look, they've had massive growth. And if anybody doesn't think that's not fueled by a tremendous amount of right-wing money, you're out of your mind. George Soros is not supporting that outfit. He's not supporting, sadly, either one of ours either. But I'm saying there is definitely big right-wing money that is promoting that show. There's just no doubt about it.
Yep.
And, fine. But I'm not going to make ideological kinship with them. That's not going to help. Tim Pulitzer, in lieu of some recent criticisms that have been directed at left-leaning figures for sanitizing certain members of the far right. That's
same question.
How did you feel at the time about Jon Stewart's friendly relationship with Bill O'Reilly? And do you feel any different about it now? I asked because a longtime viewer of the show, those interviews are starting to get recommended to me on YouTube, and I feel a little uncomfortable about looking at back.
Wow, great question. They would debate. It wasn't like they were using each other's platforms.
Colbert did the Papa Bear thing. That was worse than I think what Jon Stewart was doing.
What? Colbert did the Papa Bear thing?
Colbert had the friendly relationship with O'Reilly where he called him Papa Bear and had him on the show a whole bunch of time when he was doing. Am I misremembering this, Brendan?
That's satirical.
Yeah, he was pretending he was.
Well, it was satirical, but O'Reilly was on the show. He I'm pretty sure he guested on the show a couple of times. I think maybe I'm wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure he appeared on the show.
I think Colbert, I don't remember specifically this, and I don't remember doing videos on it, but I can tell you that from very early on in my radio career, I was critical of Jon Stewart. I mean, I was somewhat friendly with him at the time a little bit. I mean, not as a person. But I just think he was also not a particularly politically savvy guy. I think his show was also sort of not oriented towards politics. It was more like a media criticism.
Yeah.
And in many respects, devoid of politics. Colbert's show, on the other hand, was far more pointedly political. And I didn't necessarily always like all of his politics, but it was much more political. It was much more politically conscious. He's also, he also politically is a far more sophisticated person about politics than I think Stewart was. I think Stewart just didn't have that much interest in politics per se. So
the Papa Bear thing, I guess, was in the Late Show era. They did have a sit down though. I it was weird, but maybe the show was better.
I'd be more critical of Jon Stewart's relationship with John McCain rather than any debate he had with John.
Indeed. In fact, when we started the first Majority Report, Janine, because of that, was far less skeptical of John McCain than I felt comfortable. Now, this is back in 2003, 2004. But that it didn't take too long for that to go the other direction. Let's see. Bear off and Me Too. Merchandise bit idea. Lead-free paint mug club. Nomiki should be able to host Thursday since she won the bet. When are you going to go on with Destiny again? I have a list of like 3 or 4 people that I'm supposed to go and do their show. But I need to wait till July. But I would go on with Destiny if he wanted me to. I got no problem with that.
Wait, why is it a reward to host a show? That doesn't sound like I won something. No, guys.
There you go. Oh gosh, Ryan Cole. No, Sam, no. Just no. Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid did not take place in the Dakotas. It was New Mexico.
Oof.
Apologies, folks. Ryan Cole, I think Trump and company are worried that the base will stay home. They will still be with him forever, but not enough to go to the polling stations. I mean, if I was Trump, that's what I'd be worried about when I see the rally in Oklahoma. That maybe my folks are too afraid of COVID to go out and vote. Ryan says, in Northern Ireland, where the fascistic Royal Ulster Police perfected the use of rubber bullets to injure peaceful protesters, the rule was you cannot fire the bullets directly at people. Mm-hmm. You had to ricochet the bullet off the ground to diminish the force. So our police are actually worse than the RUC, which literally conspired with loyalist terrorist organizations to kill Catholics.
Oh, my God.
Maricela, I guess questions about his university's mascots and flags are off the table. Also, I'm not sure. Okay, New Mexico. We're getting an enormous amount of smoke from Nomiki's area.
Wait, they're in New Mexico? Yeah, it's bad. It's really bad.
Wow, people are really got motivated. Shorap says, F the searchers. Alex JS 485. Another reason Schumer and Pelosi like having corrupt or conservative politicians in safe blue seats is these politicians can fundraise from corporate donors with little scrutiny and then use that fund to fund the party itself, like DCCC or DSCC. Yep. Easily, essentially corporate money laundering through its safe seats occupied by conservatives. Also, I voted for Lauren Ashcraft today in NY12. Please have Nomiki tell me I made the right choice.
You did.
Because Pete Harrison also seemed like a great candidate, but I thought Ashcraft had a better shot.
Yeah, Pete's great. And but I think Lauren's got a very inspirational campaign. She's built really great structure in her campaign. And I mean, there's a lot of money in this race. Suraj Patel is I know Suraj. I've sat down with him. He talked about running a more progressive race, and I just don't see it. And so Lauren seems like the best shot right now and truly reflective of the district. And I think Pete is great. I think he's a great housing advocate. I would have liked to see more of a real campaign structure, because you have to be able to win, right? At this point, at least.
Calling from a 570 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 570. 570. Going once, going twice. Bye-bye. 760. 760. Who's
Hello?
this? Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah? Who's this?
Hey, this is Beef in San Diego.
Beef?
B.
Okay,
The
B.
letter.
San Diego. What's on your mind?
Well, I called in. Nathan has been talking about how we need to back candidates early. And I know you had AOC on Friday, and so I wanted to know why you didn't ask for her endorsement for your run in 2022 against Chuck Schumer.
You know what? I'm glad you asked that question, and I was debating as to whether I should bring this up when she came on, because I was a little concerned that AOC was coming on the show just to Bigfoot me out of the 2022 race against Schumer. I was glad that she did not do that, and I take that at this time as a tacit, an implicit endorsement for my candidacy. But of course, I haven't declared officially yet, so we'll see.
Okay.
I appreciate the call. Thank you. I think that's a legitimate question to ask. I think a lot of people had that question, and I'm glad we had the opportunity to answer it. Calling from a 616 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Ryan from Grand Rapids.
Ryan from Grand Rapids. What's on your mind, Ryan?
Yeah, I actually just wanted to call to talk about Nancy Pelosi a little bit and share a little experience that I had. So I'm a college student, and I was roped into this competition called Up to Us. And the entire point of it was to raise awareness about the national debt.
Was this done by Kick the Can? Was this like Kick the Can?
Oh, yeah, I remember them.
It's actually, I ended up finding out that the entire operation was run by a Michael A. Peterson, son of Peter G. Peterson.
Right, Pete Peterson.
And it's run by his foundation.
Yep.
We ended up winning the competition, and I was completely oblivious to how well we were doing. And we were sent out to D.C., all 5 of us on the team. We met Michael Peterson. We met Mick Mulvaney and a bunch of other people like that, Nancy Pelosi. It was an experience that taught me that these people in D.C. are just not working for you. You know, they are there to, Nancy Pelosi is there to fearmonger about the national debt at a time where she is not doing anything substantive to push back against Trump and his tax cuts that have exploded the national debt. She's there because Michael Peterson and his foundation have donated thousands of dollars to her in her re-election campaigns. And I just wanted to say, vote for Shahid.
Okay.
We need him in Congress.
All right. One, I will tell you that Nancy Pelosi has been a huge fan of Pete Peterson for many years. She spoke when he died. She spoke of him on the floor, I think, of being a great man. Now, have you come to understand that your concern about the debt is misplaced?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Actually, when I was doing it, it was kind of like me just helping out one of my friends with this campaign he was doing, and he was taking it really seriously. And we honestly won by, it was a complete shock to all of us. And since then, obviously, when I was in D.C. listening to all of them talk about it at the fiscal summit, I talked to Heidi Heitkamp about it, and just listening to all their BS, it was pretty eye-opening, to say the least.
All right. Well, I'm glad to hear that you've come around. Over in a week or two, when we are on break, we're going to have an interview with Stephanie Kelton. Again, you can also go back and listen to a couple of the interviews we've done with her over the years. And also Mike Pettis, who has another theory that involves trade, but also is sort of piggybacks on top of MMT. So appreciate the call.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. That's a good story.
Great.
I wish it ended with him like getting up in front of the Senate or the House and saying this is all a lie. That would have been fun.
Reading from the deficit myth, straight from the book.
Exactly.
Pull out the Bible.
Final call of the day, calling from a 192 area code. Who's this? Maybe it won't be the final call of the day. 192. 192. Excuse me. 925.
I was like, what's a 192? I didn't even know that was a thing.
The number one shows up. So call from a 925 area code.
Hey, it's Jeff from the Bay Area. And final call of the day, Stephen Colbert on the old Colbert Report, his entire character was based on Bill O'Reilly.
Yes.
That's what I remember, yeah.
Yes. It was a satire.
Yeah, his entire...
All right, I'm just saying he sent him off.
And I thought, but he definitely has always, it's always been more political than media, and Stewart was more media critique than political.
Thank you. Thank you for the call. Appreciate it.
You got it. Thanks for the show.
All right. Bye-bye. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. That sound signifies we will take no more phone calls. And we'll do some IMs, then we'll get out of here. Nomi, what time is your coverage start tonight?
7:30 Eastern.
7:30
on our
Eastern.
YouTube channel.
Check it out, folks.
It'll be fun.
Oregon Calyx. My dad passed away yesterday. Can get a shofar for solid old stoner guy. Love you guys. Yes. This is for solid old stoner guy. Sorry for your loss. I hope he lived a full life. Mm-hmm. Mailman Paul. How to say Nomi's name. Treat the key like it's her last name, as in Nomi Key.
There you go. You just did it. Great.
Nomi Key.
Can I show you a trick that I used to do when I was at loud bars and guys would hit on me and ask me my name?
Yeah.
Can I be completely honest? No, me, key.
Ah,
it's very cheesy.
Nice.
Yeah.
So
but it worked.
Like a double meaning. No, me, key.
There you go.
Silver Ball Stud. Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid also serves as the more introspective twin brother to Peckinpah's more broadly remembered Wild Bunch, indeed. But Matt might really like Duck You, Sucker. I could talk about Westerns all day, but it's your show. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Have you ever been to Old Tucson?
Huh?
Old Tucson?
Have I ever been there?
Yeah. It was like the set of most of the Westerns next to the spaghetti Westerns. Yeah, here in Arizona. It burned down like 20 years ago and then they rebuilt it. But it's amazing. They filmed a ton of Westerns here.
Really? Not spaghetti Westerns?
No. I'm saying it was here and the spaghetti. These were like the two major hubs of Westerns. Other than that, I can't talk much about Westerns. So,
Politica Erotica. Dear Sam, my name is also Sam. NPR copyrighted striked my video on Candace Owens versus Black Lives Matter and my reaction to her garbage mouth words, so I replaced it with clips of the Majority Report because y'all can't afford copyright robots. Plus, there's no money in an ad tube. Thank you for the redlining explanation. Love you, bro. All right, great. Appreciate it. I don't know what that means, but good. I'll check that out. 5 more IMs. Social Jewish warrior. People should not vote for Lindsey Boylan over Nadler. This is a primary to the right. Boylan is finance industry person who worked in the Cuomo administration, supported the Amazon deal. Nadler is one of the more progressive members of Congress. AOC supported Nadler.
Can I respond? AOC didn't tweet it out. It was definitely a full in. I mean, I'm not going to speak on behalf of AOC, but I think she was very worried about that. Lindsay, I've gotten to know Lindsay a little bit over the last few weeks. Couple big things. So her husband does work in finance. He has divested from anything he can actually divest from. I'm not saying it's an excuse. It's not a pure progressive one. She left the Cuomo administration in protest. She oversaw the allocation of funds in Puerto Rico. That's how I first learned about her. I was like, wow, there's actually a decent person here. Alessandra Biaggi also worked in the Cuomo administration and is one of his biggest opponents now. That happens a lot with his administration. Look at Nadler's record. That is what sold me on this. He is a product of the machine. He runs the things like a machine. There's fear trickling down from him. They're running a very dirty race against her. And, just keep that in mind. Her platform, which is important to me, is starkly more progressive than his. That's it. Just look at his back. And he's coal funded. I mean, Facebook, coal funding, Sheryl Sandberg, go down every single monopoly, all fund him. It's just not a real argument, guys.
I think I interviewed her like way back. And I'm convinced that her challenge to him pushed him towards impeachment more aggressively. And so there's that.
Yep.
Nomi has spoken. Patrick, what the heck is that?
Is she the best progressive? No, I'm sure we could have more. But don't ignore his record. I mean, that's the thing. We have to look at these people's records and not just listen to what an endorsement says. Look at the record, look at the money. New York politics is extraordinarily transactional, even on the progressive side.
Patrick from CK. So I was looking forward to getting tested at the Walmart I work at, but found out we can't. My store manager told us he doesn't want us to get tested because it would be bad for business.
What?
Wow. Amy Fair, no pregnancy tests, no pregnancies. R.I.P. Sam's mustache. Did you give me a proper eulogy after you viciously chopped me off? Henry Wadsworth, thick fellow. I may have said the part I was offering was contingent on the mustache, but I still think you're perfect for the part of catastrophic penile illness and injury insurance salesman. And bring Michael on board to play your customers having an issue with the claim I'll overlook the facial hair. I might even work in a little piece about the Social Security Trust Fund. Thank you.
Oh, my God.
John 1768. I missed the old fun half intro. The alpha males are back. Maybe we should drop that in, but we don't have a visual on that. Is that the problem, Matt?
Exactly, yeah.
Calling from Texas. Here, the VA says they don't have tests and they cannot provide doctor order get one. Elsewhere, CVS Minute Clinic offers them. You sign up and wait for an appointment to open up. You must self-administer. They cannot provide instruction. County opened up a drive-through testing site today, 3 hours prior to opening. The cops were turning cars away because they had only a limited number of tests. People have been in close contact with a confirmed case, can't stay home from work because they'll be fired without confirmed positive test that no one can get. Most people I know that did take it seriously are just giving up now and accepting they'll probably get it and spread it because they can't afford to stay. That's not, wow.
I have heard that at base, there's a base in Texas where they were having some issues. I read this a few months back, where people weren't being tested and they were, and actual enlisted people were going to their superiors, and the superiors were just saying, too bad. Like, you have to show up, you have to be stuffed into these small quarters, and they weren't giving them a test. I don't know if it's changed since then, but I know there was a little bit of protest around that.
This is basically, there's a forced, this is basically a forced herd immunity strategy.
Yep.
People should know they were celebrating Sweden and their attempts at this. The Sweden now is considered to be a disaster.
Right.
Their infection rate is far, far greater than any of the other European countries that actually went in.
Right.
It is now starting to backfire to the point where you may end up getting a right-wing government in Sweden as a function of this.
While we've been doing this, I don't know if you guys saw that the EU is prepared to bar American travelers when it reopens borders July 1st because the U.S. has not controlled the virus.
Boom.
Anti-American.
Can Sam or Nomi tell anybody what the F is the deal with the fireworks in these major cities? Many conspiracy theories abound, and I need your sober assessment. It's really making it impossible for me to gargle jizz. All right, great. Thank you for. I have no idea what the explanation is. I think the theory is that I've heard a bunch of different theories. I'm not sure what it is.
I can't speak to it. I just read the Gothamist article, but it was still projection. Nobody knew.
Nobody knows. Yeah. Made for by Milton. Any thoughts on the incessant fireworks? Okay, there you go.
There you go.
Couldn't recommend the Festool track saw enough. It's a game changer. Wow. And you don't need to get their pricey big shop vac. Get their small portable one for half the price. It's super powerful, connects to all their tools, and is their sustainer box shape. I keep the big, cheap, red, rigid one. I got that one. Oh, can't wait for the MR pencils. Ooh. You may have convinced me. I don't know if I'm able to make that purchase, but A Square. Sam, I think Mad King is aware the wizard tricks are not as effective in the midst of the local misery, but he has bars. There's also proverbial blood in the water. One wonders if Graham and others Republicans know what. Who is being investigated and want no part of this mess with the SDNY. Gringo Castro, what do you think of the President's Preservation Act tweet? I haven't seen that one. Did you see it?
No, I'll look for it right now. This just happened now?
I don't know. Frankie B, hello, Sam and Majority Report crew. Great guest today. I used to cringe when I would hear white people talk about the Black Freedom Movement, but Angela Davis states it's perfectly in that white people shouldn't be viewed as allies, but rather we're all in this together, and they have a vested interest in toppling racism and capitalism for the sake of their future as well. And the final I am of the day. When you talk about COVID-19, the death, don't scare people. You should talk about sick time, long they out sick, and at what percentage of workforce can be out sick without hurting the economy. Also, if people turn into zombies, would they act differently? All right. Nomi, always a pleasure. Have fun tonight with your coverage of the New York primary. I imagine you'll throw in the Kentucky primary in there a little bit.
Maybe a little bit, yeah.
Matt, Brendan, thank you. Brendan, congrats on the haircut. All right, folks. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid.